Redditors, have you ever gotten an ick from a potential partner or love interest that instantly killed your attraction to them? If so, what happened? First date, I was filling gas and she started going through my phone. I saw her go through it and continued to fill gas as she read my text messages. I'm a fairly open person with little to hide, but I do value trust and honesty. Soon as the pump clicked, she put it back in a hurry. I skipped the dinner plans and dropped her home. If I can't even trust you with my phone, I can't trust you with my future. Edit. What happened next? I didn't address it immediately. She didn't know I was driving towards her house until we got super close, at which point we had maybe 2 minutes left together. In a calm and "I am disappointed in you" tone, I told her I caught her in the act and this blatant breach of privacy was a deal breaker for me. She's too old to be acting like an insecure teenager, she was 26, and that she should address this behavior before pursuing serious relationships. She knew she was in the wrong. She stayed quiet till we got back and left the car without a word. Still no apology though. Edit 2. I do have a phone password. But my car is a trusted Bluetooth spot, so it stays unlocked when connected to car for music. Making spills messes and leaving it for long periods of time without cleaning it up. Like months. My sister's husband will leave dog pee on the floor for days or just pour bleach on it and then wonder why he starts coughing when he literally just made mustard gas. She was best friends with another girl who she constantly spoke shit about when said friend wasn't around. Funkhouse. Stepped into a smell that I can't describe it. George Clinton would complain about it. Then, as I was sitting on the couch, noticed gnats everywhere. Looked over at a window and there were thousands living and dead in the sill. Tried to throw away a soda bottle. Hundreds more swarmed up from the pile of dirty dishes in the sink. That was enough for me. Dated a guy who seemed chill but kept talking about social media and how people, exes, were scheming against him. I believed him at first until it got to a point where he thought things like a photo someone put up was an indicator that they were getting him back, when these people were literally just doing normal things and posting normal stuff. I think he was schizophrenic, but it was really unsettling. Months later he rang me out of the blue to ask me about a link between his ex, myself and a friend. The link was butterflies, and because of this link he thought we were conspiring against him. They started calling themselves poor, before humble bragging about making $200,000 a year and owning 2 houses that their parents bought for them. Maybe they meant poor in character. They invited me over for dinner, and to clean the table they just slung the food off the plates across the kitchen floor for the pack of dogs they had to fight over. Possibly the most unhinged crack house behavior I've seen in this thread. Where do they live? A Viking mead hall. She asked for my chapstick and then put it on her dog. I don't know, that's kinda hilarious. Yeah, this is a Seinfeld episode. I went on a date with a seemingly nice guy in my early 20s. It went well, so after dinner, we cuddled in the back seat of his car in a quiet country area listening to music. He gently played with my hand and fingers and gave me a lil massage, so relaxing. When he got to my wrist he looked at it, flipped it around a few times, and says in a lustful voice, "It would be so easy for me to break this little thing right now." Edit. I said this in response to someone below. For you guys asking about what happened after. It was maybe 2007? I don't remember in detail what happened next. I kind of just played it off like tee hee you're so strong until he took me home. Kind of tried to de-escalate, so didn't acknowledge that statement too much. Just kept the conversation moving to something else and was careful to not embarrass or upset him. I didn't keep seeing him. I was busy for the next dates he asked me on, and then acted as boring as possible until he lost interest in me eventually. We went to college together and were in ROTC together, so avoiding was kinda hard. He started a relationship with someone else pretty quickly after that. Guy. But what do I do? What do I say to her? Friend. Play with her hands, give her a massage. Tell her you love how delicate she is. Guy on the day. Okay. Play with her hands, check. Give a massage, check. Tell her how delicate she is? Okay. You know it would be so easy to break your wrist right now. Fuck. She would make up her own names for food at restaurants and try to order them. No, it wasn't part of some joke. Example. When ordering Cinnabon Delights from Taco Bell, she would say, "I want bonbons." Fuck edit. My problem isn't with people having nicknames for food. My issue is making people who are taking your order decipher what you're trying to say. Certs is what I call desserts. Trays are entrees. I call sandwiches Sammys, Sandoozles, or Adam Sandlers. Air conditioners are cool blasters. With a Z I dunno where that came from. I call cakes big ol' cookies. All noodles. Long ass rice. Fried chicken is fry chicky chick. Chicken parm is chicky parm. Chicken cacciatore. Chicky catch. I call eggs pre-birds, or future birds. Root beer is super water. Tortillas are bean blankies, and I call forks food rakes. She'd never changed her bedsheets in the year she'd been at her apartment, and the previously gray carpet had heavy brown track marks. Okay, I just have to throw out there for the kids like me raised by depressed, alcoholic, and incompetent parents. I honestly did not know how to operate a washing machine till I was 22. When I met my now husband. The floor in the house I was raised in was mopped, swept, vacuumed maybe 8 times in nearly 11 years. And the futon mattress I slept on had a literal rodent infestation. This man and his manic, but sweet mother taught me how to clean, do laundry, maintain a household, and a bunch of other shit I just genuinely was not aware of needing to be done. Sometimes the adults in someone's life neglected them to a point where they are completely uneducated on basic hygiene. Help them learn. Now if they refuse to improve, bail lol immediately. My nephew's birth, and my mother's sobriety is the only reason my childhood home looks better now. Maybe not instantly killed, but a really lovely woman telling me in a sincere voice that she loved me, 3 to 4 hours after meeting her, freaked me the fuck out in a way that I guess could reasonably be described as the ick. In no way was the statement couched either, just straight up I love you. Think I responded, "No, you don't. You've been Ted Mosby'd." I dropped the L-bomb on our second date. She replied, "Oh, thanks." She was the first woman I didn't repulse, and I think at the time immature me thought it was true. I used to joke about it and hold it over her head years ago, but as time went by my attitude changed. I now say she should have run for the hills or called me out and asked, "What are you talking about?" because obviously I didn't know what it meant. 38 years and counting, she still puts up with me. Went on a date with a guy the first met at a party. He made me prove that I liked Lord of the Rings by answering who said what when he quoted someone. He pulled out a notebook of really poorly drawn anime characters and asked me if he could draw me. He was a lot shorter than me and asked if it bothered me. I said no. Then he said, "Good, I like Amazonian goddesses." He kept trying to put his jewelry onto me despite my protests. He asked what I wanted to order for food, then ignored me and ordered me something else and got frustrated I didn't eat it all. He referenced being arrested, made me guess what for, and when I refused to guess for not knowing him well enough he said GBH. He was a trainee doctor and asked if I'd ever broken any bones. When I replied yes, he said that he was going to look up my x-rays. And the icing on the cake. When I wanted to leave he got my knee-high boots, slipped them onto my feet and zipped them up and said you should always be treated like a goddess. My Morticia Addams. All one date. Yeah, I went on a date with a girl who seemed perfectly fine. She was really nice and made interesting conversation, clearly cared and put effort in the date. But then halfway through she gets a call on her Bluetooth headset, which I hadn't even noticed beneath her hair. IDKY, but it turned me off so quick. It was a coworker calling too, and she started discussing some clearly stressful topic, planning a meeting or something. They got to near arguing and she kept rolling her eyes and sort of half winking at me every time the coworker said something that annoyed her. She ended up saying she had just seen a car crash and she had to run, which weirdly got me back into her a bit since that's a slick move, but then immediately called another coworker to complain about the first one. And kept winking at me. This was all on a Saturday morning, by the way. One of the weirdest dates I've ever been on. My brief GF bought me some hair care products before she came over because it was right by her house. In return I said I would go grocery shopping and make her a nice dinner. I thought this to be an even exchange. That night I found her looking through my trash for the receipt for the groceries to make sure that the $30 she spent on me was equal to the amount I spent on her dinner. Edit. Just to clarity before it becomes too man versus woman. I saw her parents do this to her. It was her upbringing. She did this in every aspect of her life, which gave me the ick, but she did not have very good role models. He talked in baby voice 70% of the time and only masturbated via giving his dick a bunch of small smacks over and over until he came. Mental image of ma dude slap fighting the fuck outta his dick to make himself cum is the funniest shit I've imagined in a while. Float like a butterfly, cum like a bee? LMAO. As a guy, I have no idea how that would even work. This guy doesn't know about slappy fappy. Sad. Literally every single problem she had was someone else's fault. Even when there was proof it was her fault, she would argue non-stop that it was someone else's. She got in a car wreck and called insurance over and over again to tell them that it was the other person's fault. They checked the computer in her car because it saved her speed. She was going right before the wreck. It told them everything they needed to know and she still denied it. She started trauma dumping on me, and after telling her multiple times that I wasn't comfortable talking about this in an extremely public place with kids around, she just kept going. She went into extreme detail too, showing me pictures and stuff. When I mentioned getting therapy, she said that she didn't want to change. Hard pass. Making assumptions about me on the first day. I suppose someone like you. Or a girl like you wouldn't understand. I am literally right here, ask me. Don't tell me what my life is or is like. Anyway, eventually I got up and left. They messaged me what my problem is, so I wrote back something to the effect of, "A boy like you wouldn't understand even if I told you." OMG, I went on a date with a guy who loved showing how wealthy he was. We went to a carnival and he was pulling cash out of the ATM as I stood away somewhere close by. He pissed me over and was like, "Check it out." He had a whole 4K in his account. Fearful face. Then later in the date he showed me text messages between him and his mother where he was bragging about me being fat and his mom was like, "Get it." Like WTFLMAO. I noped out. He would message me constantly after that. Weird dude. Edit to add. No, he didn't grow up poor. I did. Yes, 4K isn't a lot to most. But I was 19/20 when this occurred, and like as many of you have pointed out, 4K is a lot of money to a poor person. That's why I called him wealthy, haha, but the texts between him and his mom are the part that weirded me out the most. Guess I should have led with that. Haven't thought of it in a while, lol. Also, thanks for the laughs. She wanted me to only call her the name of her high school bully, who was Guy. That she said she couldn't stand, repeatedly. Too much to unpack. Edit. This happened like 5 years ago. I was 23 at the time and didn't really know much about dating except for what I learned in high school and was just coming to accept my sexuality. I admit, when things started to get intense I should have ended it, but I got out. This was supposed to be a little haha, look how crazy this relationship was thing. I cried my tears and am doing so much better for myself. At first I thought she had like a degrading kink, but when I asked she said she wasn't into that kind of thing. If I'm being honest, I think she maybe wanted to be like him. Turns out she was following him on all his socials, and his wife and I had similar names. A lot going on here. Met this really charming guy. Went back to his apartment one day and nearly threw up from the smell. Turns out he has a dog but doesn't take it outside to use the bathroom, so it just poos and pees on everything and only the poo gets picked up. Sometimes, and there was a year of build-up. I had taken my shoes off at the door and I deeply regret that, and there's more. Oh, there's more, but that was the grossest of it. Edit. Since people are asking about the more, but I'll warn you all, TW for animal neglect, because it gets worse. I live in a pretty isolated area, so I started online dating because it was my only reasonable option. Met this guy. It was a long-distance situation. We met up in person a few times and had been talking for months at this point. I had the self-esteem of shell-less snail and he was a manipulative narcissist, so it took me way too long to realize I could do better. But anyway, by the time I'm in his apartment that first time, I'm a few months into this relationship and I've just taken off work for a week and flown down to see him. Why do I regret taking my shoes off? Because a few steps in and my socks are already soaked in dog piss. I screamed and yanked them off, stepping barefoot into what I thought would be sweet relief of clean kitchen tiles, but no, oh sweet Jesus. It was tacky. The kitchen floor was tacky with dog piss. Like stepping in a damn fly trap. He ran and grabbed his vacuum, apologizing profusely while I leapt across the floor back to my shoes. Looking around, I see the edges of the walls near the floor are stained a sickly brown and there's stuff piled everywhere. I can hardly pay attention though because the smell is making me nauseous. So I end up getting a hotel for the week. I made up some excuse about how I wasn't comfortable staying with him yet. Because I didn't have the self-respect to fly home after that, I had the pleasure of discovering more of his unsanitary habits over that week. Such as, never once washing his sheets because he didn't believe it was necessary. He didn't believe in brushing his teeth and claimed plaque was healthy and protected your teeth. He drank an entire 12-pack of Diet Coke a day, would cook with expired food, he'd leave a pizza sitting out on the table for days eating out of it, and I kid you not he spent more time burping and farting than not. He never cleaned the apartment, and when the dog peed or pooed, the pee would be left to dry and the poo would get scraped up and whatever was left, well, it would just have to dry as well, and yes, there was buildup across the entire floor from that. He would only eat burgers at restaurants and anything I got he'd wrinkle his nose and tell me how gross. But then we get to the dog. He saw a puppy at the pet store one day and fell in love with it. He was an incredibly expensive purebred cocker. He had a few issues which I would guess was from inbreeding. Severe separation anxiety, paced constantly and the crazy eyes. Still endearing. He'd follow you around everywhere and look up at you with this zero thoughts look in his eyes and just the two front teeth showing, endless energy and loved everyone. But, BF had no clue how to care for him. He'd take him on walks maybe twice a day if he was lucky, that consisted of nothing more than a one-min circle, and he'd leave him home alone for a day or two at a time while he was working. He didn't train him to anything at all, and when he misbehaved, obviously because he wasn't trained, he'd wave a yardstick at him threateningly that the dog was terrified of. He never hit him when I was there, but I just knew he was when I wasn't around by the dog's reaction. But it gets worse yet. Like I said, he was manipulative, and started hurting the dog to manipulate me and keep me around. He would lock his dog in a tiny dark room for days at a time alone, and would tell me he's going to make him go insane. I snuck into his house one day and took pictures of the tiny room, took screenshots of the texts he'd sent me, but unfortunately he was smart enough to only say most of it in person. Animal control wouldn't do anything about it, so I tried to talk him into letting me adopt the dog. That didn't work, so then I tried taking him to the vet and getting his paperwork, but that didn't work either. He knew hurting the dog was absolutely crushing me. At that point I felt like at least removing myself from the picture would take away one reason for him to hurt the dog. So I left feeling like there was nothing I could do. I still lose sleep thinking about that goofy gap-toothed dog and wishing I could have saved him somehow. Talking about our interests, and after I listened to him blab about his lawn-scapping business, I went to talk about my interests and he interrupted me to say, "Wow, you really have nothing interesting to say, do you?" Overconfidence. Had one guy who I was on a first date with, he was nice enough at first. But then he started bragging that I should be happy that he chose to drive 1 hour to see me, and that he had other chicks he could have seen instead. He was overly confident that I was in love with him. I noped out so fast. This thread is saving my marriage. Went on a date with an outwardly normal girl. We started kissing and getting frisky back at her place, and she started meowing and acting cat-like. It was little mules at first, then leading on to her stopping, licking her fingertips and grooming her ears. She saw me make a face and questioned why I'd made a face. I was straight up and said, "Because you're pretending to be a cat." She said, "Oh, was I? Sometimes it takes over when I'm horny." We tried again, she mewed again, and I noped out of there pretty quickly after that. You want pussy, big man? Well, I am all pussy. He bullied someone in front of me. Instant disgust. She constantly thought everyone wanted to fuck her all the time, even strangers. In college I was seeing a girl who lived in student residence with me, but on another floor. She would always talk about how another guy, Tom, on her floor was obsessed with her and would show me texts between them. She said she only talked to him because he's harmless and that they're friends. I never met him. After a week, her ex-friend from high school pulled me aside and told me not to trust her. She said that the girl I was seeing is a notorious liar and that Tom doesn't exist. That she added her own number in her phone as Tom, would text herself, and then delete the sent messages. The only reason her ex-friend knew is because she saw the text message exchange happen in the reflection of a mirror when they were in the same room. I was close with front desk and asked if they could look up the names from that floor. They said yes, and told me that there was no guy named Tom on her floor. I noped out of that real quick. Man props to her former friend for looking out for you. Absolute bro move. On a second date with a guy the first liked. I mentioned that before we sleep together we should talk about birth control. He said something like, "Well, that's totally your responsibility." I said good night and good riddance. We were going to a wedding of one of my best friends and she began to talk about immigrants were stealing their jobs. I told her, "You do realize I'm an immigrant, right?" And she replied, "You don't count. You're one of us." The fuck I am. This was years ago. I legit don't remember how she got home that day. I didn't drive her back and she was gone before the night ended. The smell of her vagina was like a rotting corpse. Absolutely repulsive and putrid. I noped out and she took offense and insulted my masculinity and called me a fag. Didn't care. It was the worst smell I've ever experienced and I wasn't about to catch an STD/STI from her. I genuinely knew a girl who had zero sex, health education and didn't know she had BV and that she didn't have to smell bad and be uncomfortable. She'd heard way too many jokes about fish smell, and thought she was just unlucky and that some women just smell like that naturally. She cried when she finally ended up getting the antibiotics and stuff she needed. She had no idea. Yay Christian school education. I have an intermittent crush with a friend of mine. She's pretty, she's funny, she's extremely talented, and she's really chill. She also has ADHD and her house is messy, and downright dirty, especially her kitchen. Whenever I'm falling for her again and I go visit her for whatever reason, and see her house, my feelings die. They eventually come up again, months later, after I've forgotten how messy that house was. The amount of time he spent plotting revenge, usually against his parents or ex-wife, should have been spent introspectively and on getting his life back on track. We broke up shortly thereafter. Then we tried to reconcile. Then he smoked meth in front of me. And that was the end of that. She started to set up the relationship in a way that made me her emotional punching bag, to where I was to blame for any bad feelings she had. Nothing I could do or say in those moments could ever help the situation, because that wasn't my purpose in her life. I was the distraction from her own issues she refused to acknowledge. Her extreme moods weren't because of her, or her past, but it was because I said something the wrong way, or laid on the clean sheets with a sweaty body. The ick came about when I realized, at 40 years old, that this has always been the pattern in my relationships with women, and it has everything to do with how my mom treated me. She had her own massive trauma from being horribly abused as a child, but used that as a shield to use me as her emotional and physical punching bag when she was in a bad mood. "You're not being abused, I was abused," was a line I heard constantly as she beat me on a regular basis. Once I saw that for what it was, it disgusted me, but it also changed how I handle relationships now. And now I'm happily married for 2 years to a wonderful woman who never does that to me. The way they chewed food, it wasn't just loud, they seemed to swish it around in their mouth first. Grabbed me by the face on the first date, stroked under my eyes and said, "You need to take better care of yourself. Sir, I'm a divorced 37-year-old with kids and those under eye circles were passed down from my grandmother. They're family heirlooms and get your hands off my face, we just met and this is not a Nicholas Sparks movie." My ex used to pop zits and eat what was inside. He would tell me that he liked the crunch of the core of the zit, blackhead. We lasted a few months there. Thank you. Now I no longer have to shoulder that alone. Geez, I wasn't expecting something this repulsive this far down. I ain't upvoting that. Found out the reason he rented the house next door to his parents was so his mom would make his meals, wash his clothes, etc. Had the audacity to say, "Let me call my mom," when I mentioned I was a little hungry.